I think you could almost say that I've been gone from the Warthog community for a bit, stuck in a bit of a box of my own, doing daily streams, focusing on certain achievements, getting all the tanks baited. And lo and behold, when I was done with the whole thing, when I was, done with my main kind of goal in mind, it felt like watching a TV show and it ends, and you just feel empty. There's nothing else for you to do, and for a couple of days you just sit there contemplating the meaning of life. So, when I was going through this little cathartic process, I figured I would look back upon what's been going on in the community. I'll catch up, like reading old newspapers. So I opened up YouTube and I started watching some content. Immediately, I found that there was one thing every single video uploaded in the past 3 months together had combined. And it was something to do with the playstyle, with the tactic, and with something that players weren't very familiar with. So, I was curious, and I started looking into it, because I think as somebody who has almost 40,000 matches in the game at the moment, I wanted to kind of get to the bottom of it and figure out if this was a good or a bad thing. So, I read some comments, I watched some content, and then I went back to low tier. I've been stuck in, I think, 8.0, my 8.3 matchmaker for Ground RB. I went back down to 5.7 to figure out what was really going on. And when I realized what players had done, I was a little bit speechless, because I think it's genius. I know I might be the only one around who thinks this is actually a good thing, but this is positive. Now, the way players have done it isn't, but we'll talk more about that soon. Is the principle behind it, is the fact that the Warthog community is showing that they're very, very capable of understanding the way the game works and learning and improving upon it. So what they've done is, to explain real quickly, War Thunder is a game based around, in ground forces at least, a triangle. I call it the rock, paper, scissors. In other words, you have tanks, you have planes, and you have SPA, and they all kind of kill each other in correspondence. So a tank will be superior to the SPA will be superior to the plane, and the plane will be superior to the tank. Now, there's certain minor complexions here, which, there's different types of tanks, and then close air support as an aircraft come in different shapes and sizes. There can be bombers, attackers, or fighters, and then SPA can be semi-tank destroyers, and we'll talk more about the complexion in the next couple of weeks, but to primarize of what players have done is they've taken the lineups that I've been working on for the past few months alone, which usually tend to contain all three of these factions, and they've just made combos of two. Now, the combos, of course, can be tank and plane, tank and SPA, or, in the case of the War Thunder community, SPA and planes. Players have figured out that in order to get an aircraft into a match as fast as possible, they would like to use a fast vehicle that costs very little, and that is SPA. So what they would do is they would take the SPA, they would drive straight down the middle of the map, go to the closest capture point, cap it, bail out, and get into a plane. Now, this all on paper sounds fantastic, but there's a few problems. I think the obvious one is that if you start with an SPA, then you don't have an SPA as a backup late game, and trust me, you'll need it. The second, far bigger problem, I think mathematically looking at it, is that you're not getting any research points. An SPA, especially if it's lower tier than the one you're using, if you're up tiering your SPA and rushing for the capture point, it conserves us, 30 seconds of battle time. You're not getting any research points for that, which means that your tanks that you're trying to research are obsolete. And when you spawn a plane, bear in mind you're playing aircraft in ground RB, and the RP gain is reduced. So not just are you getting 0 to no RP for actual tanks, which are extremely slow to research at the moment, but you're getting very little and actually reduced research points for aircraft as well. So from an effective standpoint, this tactic doesn't make much sense. Where it does make sense is when you're trying to get a bunch of kills. Now, if your goal is to get as many kills as possible, then this is the tactic for you. Spawn SPA, rush into the capture point, respawn a plane, have 100% rocket accuracy, and just, get a bunch of kills. It works. What doesn't work is the math. Yet again, a lost game with 10 kills that were obtained with aircraft and a one game with 5 kills obtained by tanks will yield completely different levels of ground RP research, meaning that the game that you lost with 10 kills with aircraft will give you 0 RP for tanks, which means that you're redundantly throwing away all that time, all the effort, all the stress to get a smidge of research points, which will take you a couple of hundred matches to research a single tier. And so what I've really concluded is that this tactic is extremely well thought out. I think it's best described as a suicide trade of SPA for the plane. However, its disadvantages are that you're minimizing the amount of research points you're getting to maximize the amount of kills you're getting, at a very, kind of average possibility of actually carrying a team. Whilst you are doing damage for your team, if you don't focus closer support on the correct targets at the correct time, you can still very, very easily end up in the gutter. So, I've adapted. I've taken the tactic, I've adapted it to a playstyle, given it a good lineup, and what I've come out with is this. A tactic based upon a specific thought process. The thought process isn't to go for the capture point, it's to go for the objective. And there's a bit of a difference between the two. If you go for the capture point, your primary goal is probably to cap, die, and then whatever happens, happens. You've gotten the capture point, you've done your achievement. But if you go for the objective, it means that no matter what happens, you protect that capture point. For me, I've chosen B. Which means that no matter what happens, if at the end of the day I do not have B in my possession, if my team loses B, if my team, whatever they do, it's on me. I take full responsibility of what happens to this capture point, and I'll take full responsibility to make sure that I keep it in my team's possession. So to begin, we're going to use something that isn't an SPAA. I'm going to start off with a Sheridan. Now, Sheridan is a light tank. It's one of my favorite tanks to use to actually go for the objective, but you could technically do this with anything. You could even do this tactic with heavy tanks. However, I'll have to talk more about that in detail in the next couple of videos. Primarily, what we're doing is we're trying to go for the capture point. We're then securing it, and then we're pushing forward. We don't want to stick in the same area for too long. We want to push out. We want to force the enemy players who are trying to go for B point as well, to not be able to get there too soon. Now, eventually, we will be taken out. This is one of the disadvantages of the way tank RB works, but it's part of the game. You will get taken out. There's so many players with our aggressive technique. Eventually, somebody will get to us, somebody will damage us too hard. We could get shot down by a plane from somebody who actually rushed. Whatever happens, we have a reaction to it. We have enough spawn points, we have enough different vehicles in lineup to adapt to it, and when we do eventually get taken out, my selective now is that I'm going to look at what's happening in the game. And here comes the hard part. This is the thing that's very hard for me to explain to you, but you have to take my word for it. Close air support is the most complex playstyle in tank RB. And the reason for it is because you're doing multiple things at the same time. You have to spot players, you have to select which one of the tanks on the battlefield you should prioritize. You have to keep an eye out for incoming and respawning planes as well as SPAA. All of this is happening simultaneously, and you have only a couple of minutes to react to it. This is not a leisureful flight around like an RB. There's no site climbing, there's no scenic routes. When you're in a plane, your team really depends on you. So when I'm flying the Sabre out, I've got 16 rockets, which means I can maximize 8 tank kills if my rocket accuracy is 100%. So what I'm doing is I'm following a very simple order. My first target and the most important target is enemy SPA. If an enemy SPA spots me, before I've spotted it, I'm likely to be dead. Especially in top tier, these players are extremely good, SPA are extremely powerful. Be careful, be on the lookout. The second thing is enemy aircraft. Now, if I'm in a plane and there's a teammate in a heavy tank like a mouse sitting in the back of the game, and there's an incoming bomber with bombs or rockets, it's down to me if I wasn't able to protect him. Again, I take full responsibility for whatever happens in the battlefield when I'm flying a plane, whatever happens to the capture point when I'm in a plane. Then we come to tanks, and this is where the kind of designation comes even further down. We've got heavy tanks, we've got medium tanks, we've got light tanks, we have tank destroyers. It's not just about which tank is the strongest you want to focus on. It's not always, first heavy, then medium, then light. You also want to look at where they're positioned. Is your teammate in distress? Is your teammates being outflanked? Are you being spawn cammed by somebody? All of these things can be addressed by a good close air support pilot. You can take out anybody who's camping in the back of the map. You can take out anybody who's spawn camping your team. You can really, really assist your teammates by giving them less need to think about what's happening around them and really just focus on what they're doing at that time, which is probably focusing on the objective like you were at the start of the game in your faster vehicle. So, when we focus down on closer support with a couple of different things, how do you counter it? This is a very common question. How do I counter somebody who's in an aircraft, who's giving so much damage to our team? Well, the obvious answer is SPAA. SPAA are a lifesaver. I'll be doing a lot of videos on SPAA very, very soon. These are fantastic. I've been playing them on stream every single day these days. I've been going back to the 4.7 Ostwind, and the Ostwind has become one of my favorite SPAA to protect with. But if we're talking about top tier, Vulcan, Falcon, Gepard, Shilka, and the Type 87, all 5 of them unique in their own ways, some slightly more tank destroyer-ish than SPA, some pure SPAs, all maneuverable, well-responsive, powerful armament. You don't need to have to hit. That's the biggest trick about SPA. You don't have to hit the enemy plane in order to give them a disadvantage. Even if you just spray in the near direction, they will panic. And your best bet to killing a close air support aircraft is to make sure that he doesn't know you're actually there. The biggest amount of times I've died when flying a plane to an SPA was when I didn't know they've spawned in, when I didn't know until it was too late. When an aircraft comes within the protective bubble of the SPA and the SPA starts to fire, if you do not react within a split second, you will be dead, especially when the SPA drivers have extremely good aim. The second thing is enemy aircraft. If you're trying to kill a close air support, the second best thing to use is a fighter. Because what you can do is when you spawn in, is you dive straight down towards the bottom of the map. You get out of sight of the enemy, because there's no markers in ground or B. The enemy aircraft won't know you're approaching them. So what you do is you effectively wait for the enemy plane that's close air supporting to exit their initial attack. When they're on top of the dive, kind of doing the backwards loop, or a high yo-yo, that's when you strike. That's when the enemy plane is slowest, that's when it's weakest. That's when you have maximum effectiveness. And if you can do this, not just in the fighter, but with a fighter that has some additional close air support like rockets or bombs, you can effectively go immediately from having defeated enemy close air support, eliminating it from the map, to you becoming the primary close air support provider. And because the ability exists for you to kind of go against what somebody could be doing on the battlefield, like seal clubbing and close air support, is you can always turn the game around. What do you do, though, if you're still stuck in a tank? Let's say it's still your first respawn, or you have a dead commander, your machine gun doesn't work. There's no real way that you can shoot down a plane with a tank. What you can do is you can use your surrounding area to assist yourself. First of all, you can try to get close to an SPA, albeit I think I'd rather say that the SPA should be close to you. Use buildings. Use rock formations, use anything you can. One of the biggest tips would be use water. Water cannot be effectively killed by bombs or rockets. You have a bit of an immunity there, a bit of a slight glitch maybe. But using a house or a building or a structure or anything that you can that gets in the way of the both the plane's sight as well as their approach can effectively run the aircraft redundant. If you're sitting on the western part of the house and the plane is attacking from the east side, there's very little that they can do to actually get effective guns on target. What they can do is do a straight vertical dive, which means 90 degrees straight from the top. This will guarantee that they will be able to take you out. However, it will put them in a very nasty scenario because they're flying in a straight line. They're an easy thing to shoot down for your SPA. Most importantly, they might have a very bad time trying to pull out of that dive, which could result in a flat pancake. I guess my final opinion on close air support is this. It's a very complex game mode. It requires a lot of patience, a lot of technique, and a lot of a learning curve. If you're trying to grind out a lot of kills, then yes, this is the playstyle for you. If you're trying to grind out research points for either tanks or planes, you have a much better option at looking elsewhere. What does happen with close air support is it opens up development, and not just that, but availability for certain ground pounders that in aerialistic battles simply don't have a playstyle. The Su-6, among others, is one of those planes that really just can't be used there, but here in ground battles, it sort of has a purpose. Besides that, close air support doesn't win matches. It assists kills, it does rinse down the enemy team, but at no point is it a winning factor. What wins matches is tanks doing the objective. Doing it, holding it, protecting it, enforcing it. And so I was able to take a tactic developed by the player base who took SPAs to rush into the capture points to be able to obtain close air support. I've done that, I've adapted it to my own playstyle, joining together the American 8.0 lineup using the Sheridan, the M60A1, and the double respawn of the After Saber, which ended up yielding me a win with 3 capture points, 1 assist, and a whopping 21 kills. Now, as impressive as that might sound, it did fall 4 kills short of my kind of penultimate goal of trying to get 25 kills in one game. But it just proves my point that it is, in fact, possible. And so over the next year, you can be damn certain I'm going to be attempting to break my own record. Now, when it comes to the channel, when it comes to personal achievements on the account, I've got everything spaded now. I've gotten God of War, so there's not really that much to grind out. However, there is one particular type of a vehicle in the game that recently hasn't been played a lot on my own account, that I haven't really been paying a lot of attention to, that players struggle to play, however one that will take full advantage of the close air support spam available. All I'm going to say is that the skies are soon to be very, very cleared. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.